Far away, in a star system untouched by most known civilizations, there was a small alien colony struggling to survive. Their planet looked calm from space, with gentle hills and forests, but beneath its serene surface, danger waited everywhere. Strange storms would appear without warning, tearing through the forests and plains. Rivers could rise in minutes, swallowing everything in their path. Even the wildlife was unusual. Some creatures were massive, moving quickly and fiercely, hunting anything that crossed their path. The aliens had learned to live with the ordinary dangers of their world, but recently the planet seemed to grow more dangerous, almost as if it were turning against them. The aliens themselves were a gentle species. They had bright skin that shimmered faintly in sunlight, eyes that could see in low light, and hands made for delicate work. Their technology was advanced for their culture, but it had limits. They could build shelters that withstood normal storms, but not the violent, sudden storms that had begun to strike their homes. They had devices that could track predators for short distances, but these new threats moved too fast and in numbers, too great. Slowly, fear had begun to creep into their daily lives. Families no longer ventured far from their villages. Farmers who once worked the fields were too afraid to leave their homes. The usual sounds of laughter and play had faded, replaced by cautious whispers and anxious glances. The leaders of the colony were wise and experienced. They met frequently to discuss ways to protect their people. They tried building stronger shelters, placing barriers around the villages, and training a few volunteers to watch for danger. Yet, nothing seemed enough. Each storm felt stronger than the last. Each predator seemed faster and smarter. Every night, the aliens gathered in small groups, sharing stories of close encounters, of creatures that had almost caught them, or floods that had swept through the outskirts of the colony. Their faces showed worry, but they did not panic. They were not a weak people. They had survived before and hoped to survive again. But deep down, they all knew that if the threats continued, their world might become too dangerous to live in. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the colony's council gathered in their largest hall. The room was filled with soft light from glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The leaders spoke quietly at first, then more urgently. "Our technology is not enough," one elder said, his voice trembling slightly. "Our sensors fail to detect the dangers in time. Our defenses can no longer protect us. If we stay alone, we may not survive the next storm." Another leader nodded, adding, "We must seek help. There are other species out there, others who may have the knowledge and strength to aid us. We cannot do this alone." The room fell silent as the thought sank in. Reaching out to others was risky. They had heard stories of civilizations that ignored calls for help, or worse, that came with harmful intentions. But they had no choice. Their survival depended on someone listening to their plea. After hours of debate, the decision was made. They would send a distress signal into the void of space. The signal would describe their situation, explain their danger, and ask for help. It would be carefully crafted to show their peaceful intentions, to make clear they only sought aid. The colony's engineers worked through the night, assembling the devices needed to broadcast the message. The signal was strong, designed to travel far beyond their own star system, hoping that someone, anyone, would hear it. When it was finally ready, the council gathered once more. A single button would send their plea into the vast unknown. The aliens looked at one another with a mix of fear and hope. Could anyone be out there, willing to help? Or would their voices vanish into silence? They pressed the button. The signal was launched, cutting through space like a bright ribbon of light and sound. It traveled across planets, star systems, and empty voids. For the first time, the colony felt that they had done everything they could. They had reached out, and now they could only wait. Days turned into nights, and nights into days. The aliens continued with their lives, but a shadow hung over them. Every rustle of leaves, every distant cry from the forests made them tense. Their hearts beat faster during storms. Parents watched their children more carefully, and friends looked out for one another constantly. The uncertainty of waiting was almost as difficult as the threats themselves. Weeks passed. The alien colony received no response. They tried recalibrating their devices, sending repeated signals, but still, nothing came back. Some began to lose hope. Whispers spread that maybe the universe had no one willing to help them. Perhaps they were too small, too insignificant. But the elders reminded everyone that giving up was not an option. They told stories of ancestors who had survived, far greater dangers, who had endured when all seemed lost. "Even if no one comes," one elder said, "we must stay strong. We must prepare for the worst, but never stop hoping for the best." These words became the mantra of the colony. They trained harder, reinforced their homes, and shared knowledge of survival with the younger generation. Each day was a struggle, but each day they survived was a victory. As time went on, the alien colony began to notice subtle changes. The storms seemed to shift in pattern, moving in ways they hadn't seen before. Predators became bolder, venturing closer to villages. Even the plants seemed to grow faster, with roots and branches that could cause harm if handled carelessly. The world they knew was changing, becoming more dangerous with every passing week. Yet the colony endured. They adapted. They learned new ways to hunt, to gather food, and to protect one another. And all the while, the distress signal continued to travel across the stars, invisible, unheard, until someone far away finally noticed it. Though no one had come yet, hope remained. The aliens held on to the belief that help could arrive. They kept their eyes on the skies, watching for any sign of movement, listening for any sound in the emptiness of space. Every small flicker of light on the horizon, every unusual pattern in the stars was a reminder that perhaps they were not truly alone. And deep down, they knew that survival was not just about defending against immediate threats. It was about having courage, patience, and the willingness to trust in the unknown. The alien colony waited, prepared for anything, their hearts beating, with quiet determination, their minds alert, and their spirits ready for the day help might finally arrive. Far from the struggling alien colony, deep in the darker regions of the galaxy, a very different kind of beings lived. They were known as Deathworlders, a group of humans and other creatures who had adapted to survive the deadliest planets, worlds where normal life could not last for long. These planets had poisonous air, violent storms, extreme heat, or endless cold. Most species avoided them at all costs. But the Deathworlders thrived in such conditions. They were strong, resilient, and fearless. What others saw as impossible or deadly, they saw as challenge and opportunity. Their bodies, technology, and training made them capable of surviving almost anything. Life on a harsh planet had taught them to be alert, resourceful, and precise in every action. Danger was not something they feared. It was something they expected, studied, and overcame. The Deathworlders' ships patrolled the outer reaches of the galaxy constantly. They were explorers, hunters, and guardians of sorts, although they did not answer to anyone. Each mission they undertook tested their limits. Some were searching for resources, others were mapping dangerous star systems, and a few were simply traveling through voids that most species would never enter. Their ships were tough and heavily armored, designed to withstand hazards that could destroy normal vessels in moments. On board, the crew trained constantly. They simulated storms, attacks, and disasters to ensure that when real danger came, they would be ready. Life for a Deathworlder was never simple, but it was always full of purpose. One quiet day, as the Deathworlders' fleet navigated a particularly empty sector of space, their sensors picked up a faint signal. At first, it seemed like background, noise, a tiny fluctuation in the endless static of the void. But their instruments were sensitive, calibrated to detect even the faintest traces of life and energy. The signal repeated in a pattern, and the Deathworlders recognized it immediately. It was a distress call. They traced the signal to its origin, a small, hidden star system far from any known trade routes. Most other species would have ignored it. Signals this faint were often false alarms, interference, or remnants of long-dead civilizations. But the Deathworlders did not ignore anything. Every call, every faint pulse of life mattered. They had learned that even the smallest signals could lead to life-or-death situations, and sometimes to something extraordinary. The crew gathered in the main observation room. Holographic screens displayed the star system, its planets, and the source of the signal. It came from a single, modest planet that appeared calm from orbit. No large cities, no fleets, no signs of war. Yet the signal was urgent, almost desperate. The Deathworlders analyzed it, decoding the language embedded in the message. It was complex, but clearly a plea for help. The aliens who sent it described storms, dangerous wildlife, and environmental changes that threatened their survival. They were intelligent, peaceful, and completely unprepared for the escalating dangers around them. The Deathworlders studied the data carefully, recognizing both the seriousness of the situation and the opportunity to intervene. Unlike most civilizations, the Deathworlders did not hesitate. Their culture, shaped by survival in impossible conditions, taught them that action mattered more than hesitation. They could have continued their patrol, leaving the signal to fade into silence, like almost every other species would have done. But their instincts, honed over generations, told them that this situation required immediate attention. The decision was unanimous. They would respond. Preparations began instantly. Ships adjusted their course, engines roared to life, and crew members checked their equipment, weapons, and protective gear. Every detail mattered. They did not know what dangers awaited them on the alien planet, so they prepared for everything. As the fleet moved closer to the planet, the Deathworlders observed it carefully. From orbit, the world appeared beautiful but deceptive. Green forests stretched across the continents, rivers glimmered in sunlight, and clouds swirled gently above mountains. But the sensors showed danger everywhere. Unusual energy readings suggested violent storms could form in minutes. Large predators roamed the forests, capable of destroying structures and attacking in coordinated packs. Certain areas were unstable, with quicksand-like terrain and sudden drops that could swallow anyone unaware. The Deathworlders, trained to read and understand extreme conditions, immediately began strategizing. They identified safe landing zones, calculated optimal routes to reach the alien settlements, and predicted where help would be most urgently needed. Finally, the fleet descended. Ships moved with precision, gliding through the planet's atmosphere like shadows against the sky. The aliens, watching from their homes, saw these massive, sleek vessels and were filled with awe and fear. They had expected help from distant civilizations, but never imagined beings who seemed so powerful, so prepared, and so strange. The Deathworlders landed calmly, using specialized craft that could withstand environmental hazards. The first team disembarked, fully equipped with survival suits, tools, and medical supplies. They moved quickly and efficiently, scanning the area for threats. To the aliens, it was like watching spirits of strength and knowledge come to life. The Deathworlders did not waste time on introductions. Their priority was assessing the situation, locating danger zones, and protecting the most vulnerable. They examined the storms, studied predator movements, and reinforced areas that were at immediate risk. Unlike other rescuers, the aliens might have imagined, the Deathworlders treated the environment itself as both a challenge and a resource. They used natural formations to build temporary shelters, constructed barriers from local materials, and taught the aliens how to use their surroundings to their advantage. The aliens were amazed and grateful, though still cautious. These beings were unlike anyone they had ever seen. They were strong, intelligent, and fearless. But there was also a sense of mystery and authority about them that made the aliens both respectful and curious. In the days that followed, the Deathworlders continued their work. They organized rescue operations, secured the settlements, and neutralized immediate threats from both storms and wildlife. Their presence was powerful and reassuring. The aliens began to trust them, watching closely and learning from their techniques. The Deathworlders shared knowledge quietly but effectively, always emphasizing that survival required observation, preparation, and courage. Slowly, the aliens began to see that their desperate plea had been answered not by ordinary neighbors or distant governments, but by beings who thrived in danger, who were born to survive where others would fail. For the first time in months, hope began to return to the colony. The signal had been heard, and the rescuers had arrived. Yet even as the aliens marveled at the Deathworlders' skill, the true challenge was only beginning. The planet's dangers were relentless, and the lessons of survival were harsh and demanding. But the Deathworlders were ready for it all. They would not only protect the aliens, they would teach them, train them, and transform their understanding of what it meant to endure in a world that seemed determined to destroy them. And in the shadows of that dangerous planet, two very different species began a partnership that would change the future of both forever. The Deathworlders' ships glided through the thick atmosphere of the alien planet, moving with silent precision. From high above, the colony looked small and fragile. Tiny clusters of homes were scattered across forests and plains, and streams of water sparkled in the sunlight. The aliens watched nervously from their windows and rooftops. They had heard tales of distant civilizations, some helpful, some indifferent, and some outright dangerous. But they had never seen anything like the Deathworlders. These newcomers were enormous, efficient, and confident, like predators who only used their strength for protection, not destruction. The aliens didn't know what to expect. Hope and fear battled inside them. The first ships landed near a village that had suffered most from recent storms. The ground shook slightly as massive landing gears touched down, and a few trees trembled in the shock waves. Dust and leaves rose into the air, swirling around the landing zone. From inside the ships, the Deathworlders emerged. They were clad in reinforced survival suits, carrying tools and supplies designed to operate in extreme conditions. They moved with careful precision, scanning every corner of the area, examining every shadow for hidden dangers. The aliens hesitated at first, unsure if these strange beings were here to help or if they were something to fear. A small group of aliens stepped forward, led by their council. They approached slowly, hands raised in greeting. The Deathworlders acknowledged them with slight nods but did not stop their work. Immediately, they began examining the village's damaged structures. Homes that had been partially destroyed by storms were reinforced with advanced materials, strengthened in ways the aliens had never imagined. Fallen trees blocking paths were removed quickly, and the team set up temporary barriers against the next predicted storm. The aliens could only watch in awe as these newcomers turned chaos into order within hours. One of the elders, a small, cautious alien named Lyra, finally spoke. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why have you come here?" One of the Deathworlders stepped forward. Though their helmet concealed most of their face, Lyra could sense confidence and calm in their presence. "We are here to help," they said simply. "We received your distress signal. Your planet is dangerous, and we are trained to survive in conditions like these. We will protect you and teach you how to survive in this world." Lyra's eyes widened. She had never expected someone so strong to offer assistance without asking for anything in return. The words felt almost unbelievable, yet the actions of the Deathworlders made it real. The next days were a whirlwind of activity. The Deathworlders did not waste time on formalities or lengthy explanations. Their priority was ensuring the safety of the colony. They moved through the villages, examining homes, assessing which areas were most at risk, and reinforcing weak spots. They taught the aliens simple, yet effective survival strategies: how to detect predators before they approached, how to reinforce homes against storms, and how to navigate dangerous terrain safely. For the aliens, every day was a lesson, every interaction a glimpse into the skill and knowledge the Deathworlders carried. Despite their efficiency, the Deathworlders did not ignore the small details. They distributed food and medical supplies where they were needed most. They repaired broken bridges, cleared blocked paths, and even built observation points from which the aliens could watch for incoming storms. The colony, which had lived in constant fear, began to feel a sense of relief. For the first time in months, people slept more peacefully, knowing that someone was watching over them. Children, who had been too afraid to play outside, started venturing into safe areas again, laughing and exploring under the careful supervision of the Deathworlders. The alien scientists were especially curious. They observed the newcomers closely, asking questions about their technology and methods. The Deathworlders answered simply, demonstrating techniques rather than giving complex explanations. They showed how to use local materials to build stronger shelters, how to camouflage villages to make them less noticeable to predators, and how to create traps and alarms that could detect danger before it arrived. The aliens learned quickly, their minds opening to ideas they had never considered. It was clear that these visitors were not just saviors. They were teachers, sharing knowledge that could change the colony forever. Predators, once a constant threat, began to retreat. The Deathworlders used clever strategies to control their movements, setting boundaries and safe zones. Storms, which had seemed unpredictable and unstoppable, were tracked with greater accuracy, allowing the colony to prepare in advance. Every day, the aliens saw proof that these beings were capable of surviving challenges that would have destroyed ordinary species. And yet the Deathworlders showed no arrogance. Their focus was always on the task at hand, protecting the colony, teaching its people, and adapting to every new challenge the planet presented. Lyra began to see a change in her community. Fear was being replaced by confidence. Families worked together to implement the lessons of the Deathworlders. Farmers learned to protect their crops from wild animals and sudden floods. Builders strengthened homes and created emergency shelters. Even the children contributed, learning simple techniques for safety and observation. The presence of the Deathworlders inspired courage and ingenuity. For the first time, the colony began to feel that survival was not just about avoiding danger. It was about understanding it and learning to live with it. As the days passed, trust deepened. The aliens realized that the Deathworlders were not just strong. They were intelligent, disciplined, and compassionate. They cared not only for immediate survival, but also for the long-term well-being of the colony. Slowly, the initial fear gave way to gratitude. Villagers who had been hesitant at first now approached the Deathworlders with questions, seeking guidance and advice. The relationship was built on respect, trust, and shared purpose. Two very different species, separated by experience and biology, were learning to work together in a way that neither could have anticipated. And yet the planet was still dangerous. Storms could strike without warning, and predators remained a constant threat. The aliens knew that the Deathworlders had come prepared, but they also understood that the path to survival would require effort, adaptation, and courage. It was a lesson in resilience, one that would shape the colony for generations. The Deathworlders had arrived when all hope seemed lost, and their presence was already changing everything. Through careful guidance, protection, and teaching, they We're transforming a fearful, struggling community into one capable of enduring even the harshest conditions the planet could offer. For the first time in months, the alien colony felt a sense of optimism. They had reached out into the vast unknown, and help had arrived. Not just any help, but help from beings who had mastered survival in the deadliest environments imaginable. The lessons had begun, the bond had started, and the future looked brighter than it had in a long time. But this was only the beginning. The Deathworlders were here not just to save them, they were here to transform the way the colony understood life, survival, and strength. And the aliens, once desperate and fearful, were ready to learn, adapt, and endure. After the initial arrival and rescue efforts, the Deathworlders did not leave the colony to simply survive on their own. They stayed for weeks, teaching, training, and helping the aliens in ways that went far beyond basic protection. The alien community, which had lived in fear for months, was now learning to see danger as something that could be managed, studied, and even anticipated. Each day brought new lessons, challenges, and experiences that were both exciting and demanding. First lessons focused on understanding the planet itself. The Deathworlders explained how the storms moved, what signs indicated dangerous shifts in the weather, and how to prepare shelters to withstand even the strongest winds and rains. They showed the aliens how to read subtle changes in the clouds, the movement of wildlife, and the behavior of rivers and streams. Slowly, the aliens realized that their world, which had seemed unpredictable and hostile, could actually be understood and managed if they paid attention and used careful strategies. The knowledge of the Deathworlders gave them a sense of control they had never felt before. Predators remained one of the most terrifying threats. Large creatures roamed the forests and plains, some moving in groups, others hunting alone with terrifying speed. The Deathworlders taught the aliens to observe patterns in predator behavior, to set up early warning systems, and to create safe zones around villages and farms. They also showed ways to construct traps and deterrents using local materials, ensuring that protection could continue even when the Deathworlders were not nearby. For the aliens, watching these predators retreat or avoid the areas reinforced their growing confidence. They began to see that danger could be managed, and that survival was no longer just a matter of luck. Survival skills extended beyond protection. The Deathworlders taught techniques for finding food and water safely in the wild areas. The aliens learned to identify edible plants that they had previously overlooked, to track animals for hunting when necessary, and to purify water using simple but effective methods. Every day brought practical lessons which were reinforced through hands-on practice. Children, once too afraid to leave their homes, began accompanying their parents into safer areas to learn these skills. The elders encouraged participation, seeing that knowledge passed on early would make the entire colony stronger. Life skills also included how to repair and reinforce homes, build secure storage for food and supplies, and create communication methods to warn others of danger. The Deathworlders demonstrated ways to use natural terrain to their advantage, such as positioning homes near cliffs or rivers to provide barriers against predators or floods. They taught methods of camouflage to make the villages less noticeable, from above or from a distance. Every small action had a purpose, and the aliens slowly began to see their world through a new lens. What had once seemed hostile and uncontrollable now appeared as a challenge that could be faced with planning and courage. One of the most important lessons was mental resilience. Fear had ruled the colony for months, but the Deathworlders emphasized that survival required a calm mind, quick thinking, and the ability to adapt. They shared stories of the dangerous planets they had endured, describing how challenges that seemed impossible could be overcome with patience, observation, and courage. They encouraged the aliens to stay alert, but not paralyzed by fear, to learn from mistakes, and to trust in their own growing abilities. Slowly, the community's mindset began to change. Anxiety gave way to focus, despair gave way to determination, and hesitation gave way to careful action. The aliens themselves began to contribute their ideas, combining what they knew about their planet with the strategies taught by the Deathworlders. They suggested new ways to protect crops, discovered hidden resources that the Deathworlders had overlooked, and improved on shelter designs to suit their own environment. It became clear that the collaboration was mutual. The Deathworlders were teaching survival, but they were also learning from the aliens about the unique patterns of the planet. Together, they were creating a system of defense, preparation, and adaptation that neither species could have achieved alone. Social life began to improve as well. Villages once filled with fear and caution were now buzzing with purposeful activity. People repaired homes, reinforced barriers, and participated in safety drills. Children practiced safe exploration, learning to identify dangers and to help one another. Families worked together on food and water security, and elders passed on both old wisdom and new lessons learned from the Deathworlders. Even simple tasks, like walking through the forest or traveling between villages, were approached with attention, care, and confidence. The colony, once fragile and anxious, was growing stronger every day. The Deathworlders also prepared the aliens for emergencies they could not yet predict. They taught strategies for sudden storms, unexpected predator attacks, and dangerous terrain changes. Each scenario was simulated, allowing the aliens to practice how to respond calmly and efficiently. Mistakes were corrected without criticism, reinforcing learning rather than fear. By the end of these exercises, the aliens began to feel a sense of pride. They could face dangers that had once terrified them. Their world, while still dangerous, no longer seemed overwhelming. They had the knowledge, the skills, and the courage to survive. Over time, respect and admiration grew on both sides. The aliens admired the Deathworlders' strength, intelligence, and ability to endure extreme conditions. They saw that these visitors were not just powerful, they were careful, disciplined, and compassionate. The Deathworlders, in turn, respected the aliens' willingness to learn, their creativity, and their courage in facing dangers that the Deathworlders themselves had only seen as challenges. Bonds formed, not just between individuals, but between entire communities. Two species, different in every way, were learning to trust and rely on each other, united by a shared purpose: survival. By the time the first massive storm of the season arrived, the aliens were ready. Homes held strong, food supplies were secure, and people knew where to go for safety. Predators were managed, and early warning systems allowed for rapid response. When the storm hit, the colony endured with far less fear and far greater confidence than ever before. Children and adults alike participated in maintaining safety, and even small mistakes were corrected quickly and efficiently. The Deathworlders, guided when needed, but much of the preparation and response came from the aliens themselves. For the first time, the colony was not just surviving, it was thriving in the face of danger. The lessons of survival extended beyond the immediate. The aliens began to see a future where they could endure any threat their planet presented. They could rebuild, adapt, and even grow stronger with each challenge. Their world, once a place of fear and uncertainty, had become a place of learning, strength, and resilience. The Deathworlders, having fulfilled their mission, prepared to leave, but they left behind more than supplies and strategies. They left a legacy of courage, knowledge, and hope. The aliens had learned that survival was not only about avoiding danger, but about understanding it, adapting to it, and using every lesson to grow stronger. By the end of these weeks, the alien colony was transformed. They were no longer helpless, fearful beings. They had been trained, guided, and inspired by the Deathworlders to become a society capable of thriving in their dangerous world. And though the Deathworlders would eventually depart, the knowledge, skills, and courage they left behind would shape the colony for generations. The aliens now understood that true strength came not just from technology or intelligence, but from resilience, adaptability, and the willingness to face the unknown. By the time the final days of the Deathworlders' stay arrived, the alien colony had undergone a remarkable transformation. The villages, once fragile and scattered, now looked organized and prepared. Homes had been reinforced, food and water. Supplies were secured, and protective barriers and observation posts were established in every community. The alien people moved with a new confidence, navigating their world with awareness and care. Even the children, once timid and fearful, ran through the forests and fields with courage, their eyes alert and bright with curiosity. Life had regained a sense of purpose and strength that the colony had not felt for many months. The Deathworlders continued to guide them, but by now, the aliens were active participants rather than passive learners. They implemented strategies, corrected mistakes, and shared ideas. Some of the colony's scientists developed innovative ways to combine their traditional knowledge with the Deathworlders' survival techniques. They improved water collection systems, created stronger shelters, and designed safer pathways through the forests. Every success built their confidence further. They began to see their world not as an enemy, but as a place full of challenges that could be managed with skill, patience, and courage. The bond between the aliens and the Deathworlders had grown deeper than either species had expected. Trust, respect, and admiration flowed both ways. The aliens admired the Deathworlders' skill, fearlessness, and ability to survive in conditions that would destroy any ordinary civilization. The Deathworlders, in turn, respected the aliens' creativity, adaptability, and willingness to learn. What had begun as a rescue mission had become a partnership. They shared meals, exchanged stories of distant worlds, and even celebrated small victories together, creating memories that would last long after the Deathworlders departed. One day, as another storm approached the horizon, the Deathworlders gathered with the colony's council. "This is the final exercise," one of the leaders said. "You now have the skills, the knowledge, and the courage to survive any storm or threat on this planet. We will guide you one last time. But after this, you must rely on what you have learned." The aliens listened carefully, understanding the importance of the moment. This exercise was not just a test of skill, it was a demonstration of how far they had come. As the storm arrived, the aliens put their training into action. They checked shelters, secured supplies, and organized patrols. Children and adults alike moved with purpose, knowing what to do and when. Predators were carefully managed, and early warning systems worked perfectly. The storm was strong, but the colony weathered it without panic or loss. The Deathworlders observed quietly, their expressions hidden behind helmets, but their presence calm and approving. They saw the fruits of weeks of guidance, a colony that had transformed from fragile and fearful into resilient and capable. After the storm passed, the atmosphere of the planet seemed lighter. The aliens celebrated quietly, aware that their survival was no longer uncertain. They had endured the storm using their own skills, guided by the lessons of the Deathworlders, but executed by themselves. Pride and confidence filled the villages. Elders spoke of the transformation with awe. Children played safely outside, and families looked at one another with renewed hope. The presence of the Deathworlders had changed everything. Finally, the day came for the Deathworlders to depart. The aliens gathered to say goodbye, feeling a mix of gratitude, respect, and sadness. Leaders and villagers offered gifts, gestures of friendship, and words of thanks. "You came when we had no hope," Lyra said, addressing the Deathworlders. "You taught us how to survive, how to endure, and how to grow stronger. We will never forget you." The Deathworlders nodded quietly, their expressions calm, but the aliens could sense a sense of pride and satisfaction in their presence. They had fulfilled their mission, and the colony was ready to continue on its own. As the ships lifted off, the aliens watched silently. Dust and leaves swirled in the air, and the massive vessels disappeared into the sky, moving toward the stars. For a long time, no one spoke. The colony had been saved, but more than that, it had been transformed. The lessons, skills, and courage instilled by the Deathworlders would remain, shaping the future of the society for generations. The aliens knew that survival was now in their hands, and they were ready for it. In the weeks that followed, the colony continued to thrive. Villages became stronger and more organized, children grew more confident and adventurous, and families worked together with purpose. Storms and predators were still present, but the fear that had once dominated daily life had been replaced with confidence and preparation. The aliens applied everything they had learned, and their success reinforced their belief in their own abilities. Stories of the Deathworlders' arrival and guidance spread throughout the colony, becoming tales of courage, learning, and hope. These stories inspired younger generations to continue practicing survival skills and to respect both their environment and the lessons passed down to them. Over time, the alien society became more resilient, innovative, and self-sufficient. They developed new ways to defend themselves, improve their homes, and protect resources. They also began teaching younger members of the colony about the Deathworlders' lessons, ensuring that the knowledge would never be lost. The arrival of the Deathworlders had been more than a rescue. It had been the beginning of a new way of life, a new perspective on strength, adaptation, and collaboration. Even long after the Deathworlders had gone, the aliens remembered them, as beings who arrived from the void when all hope seemed lost. The visitors had not only protected them, but had also transformed the way they viewed danger and survival. They had taught the aliens that true strength comes from knowledge, preparation, courage, and the willingness to adapt to any challenge. The alien colony was no longer fragile, fearful, or unprepared. It had become strong, resilient, and confident, a community capable of enduring even the harshest conditions the planet could offer. As the years passed, the aliens told the story of the Deathworlders to new generations. Children listened in wonder, imagining the mysterious beings who had arrived silently from the stars. The lessons of survival became part of the culture itself, shaping traditions, education, and daily life. Every time a storm appeared, or a predator threatened, the colony faced it with calm determination, remembering the guidance and courage of those who had once taught them to endure. The memory of the Deathworlders inspired not fear, but confidence, showing that even in the darkest moments, help could arrive from unexpected places, and strength could be built through learning and courage. The alien colony had survived, learned, and grown. Their story became one not just of rescue but of transformation. They were no longer helpless victims of a harsh world. They were masters of their own survival, guided by the lessons of beings who had thrived where others could not. And though the Deathworlders were gone, their influence lived on. In every shelter, every strategy, every brave child exploring the forests, and every adult teaching the next generation the art of resilience. The aliens had endured, grown stronger, and learned that hope, courage, and knowledge could conquer even the deadliest challenges.